Hey guys, welcome back to the shop where I'm building this Roubo style woodworking bench. This is part 2 of my build series. If you haven't seen part 1, I really encourage you to go back and watch where I build this massive leg assembly. In part 2, I'm going to go over building the 2 split top sections and install the 2 vices, a wagon vise and a leg vise. Now, some of you guys have asked, what is a Roubo style workbench and why did I choose on building one? There are about a million varieties of workbench, ranging from simple plywood on 2x4s all the way up to the really complicated English-style workbenches. I narrowed my choices down to about 3 different workbenches: the Nicholson-style workbench, a flat-top workbench, and the Roubo-style workbench. Going through the 3 of them, the Nicholson-style workbench is probably the easiest to assemble. It's traditionally made out of 2 2x12s on the top or something similar, and then 2 2x12s on the side that serve as aprons. On a Nicholson-style bench, you usually don't install a vise. Instead, you have a crotchet, which is sort of a vertical planing stop, and then you have a bunch of dog holes where you use holdfast to hold everything down. Next, I looked at building a flat-top bench, either with a face vise or a shoulder vise, and a tool tray in the back. I decided a tool tray wasn't for me, not really what I want. I want a big flat work surface, although the shoulder vises look very cool. This style of bench would be a lot more difficult to build than the Nicholson-style bench due to the inclusion of a vise. Finally, onto the Roubo style bench. Again, a bit more work to build than the Nicholson style bench, but a nice big flat surface, and I really like the split top sections with the gap in the middle. It can either be used as a planing stop, or I can fish clamps through the middle and use it as another clamping surface. The bench I designed and built has 2 rows of dog holes, which allows me to hold down big flat objects. Eventually, all the different styles of benches start to flow together as you pick and choose different features. No one bench design is really right for everything, and you just need to pick one and go with it. Picking up where we left off last time, my buddy Mark helped me haul and unload enough material from the lumberyard to finish out the bench. And now, just like last time, it's time to rough cut all the material to size, sort it into an order that minimizes defects and looks good, and then glue it up. We glued up pairs of boards and then resurfaced the pairs to get perfect seams throughout the slabs. The original plans called for running the 2 split top sections through a planer to get them parallel. Although that would have worked, these 2 split top sections would have fit through this lunchbox planer that I have here. Because the only part that you're planing is from the dog hole strip over, we decided at that point that the 2 sections were getting so heavy that there was no way that we were going to get them through the planer safely. Instead, we came up with a plan to build a router sled and then surface the top sections that way. By keeping the sides of the sections perfectly parallel during the glue up, we were able to clamp guides straight onto the top sections and use those as our rails. Using an 1.5 inch bottom cutting bit made quick work of the rough surfacing. Next, onto the dog hole assembly itself. For a quick reminder, the dog holes sit between the main slab and the faceboard. For our dog hole strip, we found a wide 12-quarter piece which we backed with hardwood. Now we have to make a big decision. Round dog holes or square dog holes. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. However, it's nearly impossible to retrofit square dog holes into an existing bench, so I figured now or never and went with them. Square dog holes get installed with a forward-facing angle and a top lip to keep the dog from falling down. The forward-facing angle pushes stock into the wagon vise. It also makes for a very complicated router jig. After a bunch of hemming and hawing, we ended up making 2 jigs, one for an angled dado cut and a second to make the top lip. Using 2 jigs might seem like a waste of time, but it ended up working really well. You can also see that we made mirrored dog hole strips for both sides of the bench. More on that later. We glued the dog hole assembly to the bench with a hardwood backer. This is needed to properly space out the wagon vise, and then this step is done. Placement of the dog hole assembly is important. The end of the dog hole strip begins the wagon vise cavity. The rest of the wagon vise cavity is routed out from the underside of each slab to make room for the screw and carriage system. We made another future-proofing decision and routed wagon vise cavities in both slabs. If I ever get stuck in another small shop, this will give me more placement options. Even better, maybe I'll run into another wagon vise setup and have parallel vices. Here we are cutting the dovetails for one of the faceboards. These dovetails fit into the pins on the end cap. I wanted to go through the end cap here. I have the non-vise side end cap. I took it off temporarily to show you guys what's involved in this. So on the back side here, I have the mortise for the associated tenon, which is built into the bench. And then there are 2 through bolt holes that are recessed. One of them is elongated to allow for wood movement between the end cap and the bench itself. And then on the vise side end cap, there would also be a half-blind dovetail here on this one side for the faceboard. There would be a through hole for the large screw for the wagon vise. There's a recessed bearing plate within the wood. There's an external bearing plate with 2 mounting screws, and then there's the handle on top of all of that. The end cap ended up being one of the more difficult pieces to make because of so many different cuts that had to be set up for it. I think there's 6 or 7 or 8 different cuts, or 6 or 7 to 8 different components into the end cap alone, and there are 2 of them on this bench. Earlier on, we laid out the large tenons, flush cut the slabs, and then used the same router jig to cut the tenons to final size. Finally, we bolted on the end cap. Saving you from another glue up, we attached the faceboard and screwed the wagon vise rails on. Now the wagon vise is done. Time to start building the leg vise. To build the leg vise, we need to glue up the chop, route cavities in the leg and the chop for the scissor mechanism, and install the main screw. After clearing space for the scissor mechanism in the chop, it's on to drilling out the main screw. And then preparing the leg itself. Carefully tapping the metal screws into the wood. After attaching the outer metal plate, the main screw just drops in and is secured by a single pin into the handle. It really is impressive how the scissor mechanism just glides with the heavy chop. Once the leg vise is done, we were on to the home stretch and began final assembly. We use some pins for the short stretchers and the legs, and then we use barrel nuts and bolts for the long stretchers. There are 4 large mortise and tenon joints holding the leg assembly onto the 2 split top sections. We did a dry assembly, and then my wife and I actually bought a new house. So we put it all together, we tested it all out, and we put it onto a truck and moved it up here. You might have noticed that I'm in a different shop now. With some help from my friends, I got it up here, and we did final assembly, and now the bench sits in its final resting spot. I've used it for a couple projects now, and I really love it. The quality of the kit is great. The plans are really well thought out. Although I used them as a starting point for my bench, it really helped out along the way. Overall, it took about 5 months to get the project done. I'd say the 2 split top sections weigh about 200 pounds each, and then the leg assembly is probably in that same 200-pound ballpark. So it's a really heavy bench. It's not something that you want to move very often, and I hope it's going to stay here for a really long time. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section. I'll try to answer them. Now that we've got this new house here, I've got a whole new set of projects in the pipeline. I'd love to have you follow along, so please subscribe. Thanks for watching.